The modern attack surface is vast and permeable, extending from the data center to the cloud and device edge. Security teams are stretched thinner and thinner as they try to cover this ground. The result? More high-profile breaches hit the news every day. Don't let your organization be next. ExtraHop delivers security from the inside out, helping enterprise security teams detect threats up to 95% faster and cut staff time to resolve by 2/3 or more. Act with confidence. Learn more at extrahop.com/securityweekly. Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/BHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security. Major data security breaches continue to make headlines. Are you prepared? Standardizing your security framework will help you stay competitive, be a reliable business partner, and manage intellectual property, financials, and employee and customer information. The American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, offers the standards you need in one place through standard subscriptions, a cost-saving, fully customizable solution. Sign up for your free trial at securityweekly.com/ANSI.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Paul Asadorian. Register for our upcoming webcast with ServiceNow by going to securityweekly.com/webcast. Also, if you've missed any of our previously recorded webcasts, you can find them at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Also, this is the last week for our 2019 Security Weekly Index Security Weekly 25 Index Survey. Please go to securityweekly.com and click the survey link to help us understand who's evaluating, using, or formerly used any of the Security Weekly 25 companies. The results will be summarized and presented back to all responders in a private webcast. All right, let's get to our articles for the week. So this first article I pulled up was a report about 94% of CIOs and CISOs have to make protection compromises. And what I thought was interesting, Paul, in this discussion, right, is that it was the majority of IT leaders, 79%, believe their company's employees unintentionally invited security risk into their organization in the last 12 months. And this goes back to that conversation we just had about identity and user, and the application is kind of that new perimeter, and others are starting to see that is becoming a big part of the entry into an organization.
I think it's more interesting to talk about what are the 6%. What are they saying?
Yeah, that's true too.
Do they not know, or do they not have a network? Nobody has any technology, therefore we're not making any compromises. I just thought that was funny.
Or 6%, maybe only 6% actually don't have to make compromises to protect their environment, which means only 6% of the industry has the budget that they need to actually secure their networks, which is also would be a scary stat.
Yeah, or 6% are just lying, I guess, would be my that's my theory. That's my theory.
I don't know. It's just interesting the compromises that organizations have to make from a security perspective, either due to budget or other limitations.
I think even if you had an unlimited budget, you'd still have to make compromises to allow users to work. I mean, you could have all the technology in the world, but people still have to do their jobs. And anytime you've got a user that accesses the internet, right, or is connected, there's inherent risk there, and that in and of itself is a compromise.
Right. That is true. Number 2, strive to continuously create value. In reading this article, it was interesting. The original article starts about personal, creating value for yourself, but then how do you apply that to work? And I'm a big believer in value creation, where we talk a lot about value creation and creating value. If from a business perspective, people will buy when they see value. They're not going to buy for the sake of buying. And so then how do you strive to create value to your customers from a business perspective? And it just, we did a session, Paul, down at InfoSec World
Oh
with
yeah.
a number of potential sponsors about the message framework and how to take your message and derive value or perceive value of the organization. And this article kind of aligns a little bit to some of the things we just tried to train a bunch of potential sponsors on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there were sponsors and potential sponsors, and their feedback was extremely valuable to us, right? I hope what we presented to them was valuable. I thought it was. A lot of people were, shaking their heads and giving very positive responses, but it's all about creating value. And this is in the business sense, right? It's twofold. You have to create value for your customers, and regardless of what your role is in the company, you have to think about how you provide value to the business that ultimately can allow the business to provide value to the customers. So,
Yeah, exactly right. And if we're not creating value, and this is one of the big things for me as a persister, right? Is if I'm not creating value, then I'm not going to be happy at the end of the day
right,
because
it's rewarding.
all of us, right, as humans have that need
Mm-hmm.
um, to create value or
You
to
need a
be
purpose.
valuable. Yeah, you need a purpose in life, right? Exactly right. And again, it talks about, focus on tasks that create value, and not waste time on tasks that don't create value, just to
Right.
help you prioritize even your daily activities and always thinking about that value creation through the things that you do and how you ultimately drive your
Now,
career.
Mike is in Lee have both have given me valuable advice over the course of my career. And one of the things that you can't not like remember, it just sticks in your brain, is they really were coaching me and a lot of other people too, to talk about what value do you create for the organization, right? That's a conversation you should be having with your manager or the owner of the business, is what value do you create, right? And whether you want to change positions, whether you want to advance to a different position, or get a raise or a bonus or whatever it is, the conversation comes down to, when you manage your career, defining what value you provide to the organization, and if you're going to make a change in any capacity, how you can increase that value. And that's really what they drove home with me, which is when I read this article is where I went, because we just interviewed Mike.
No, and you're exactly right. The reason people leave is because they don't believe they're providing value or their needs are not met,
Mm-hmm.
or a combination of both. And if you're out recruiting, advanced skill sets, they're going to want to make sure they're driving value to the organization. They're going to want to make sure their needs are being fulfilled. And if they're not, that's when you're going to see turnover. That's when you're going to see people leave. And so I think this is good for both management to understand the needs value side of the equation, but also for employees themselves to say, look, am I providing value? Yeah, are my needs are met? And if I'm not, that's probably when you're going to look. That's typically the reason I would change a position, is because I don't think I could drive any more value, or I couldn't be effective in a role. Then maybe it was time to move. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's just something to kind of, it's an introspection as an employee, but managers need to be cognizant of this as well, is because that's what your employees are thinking. And if you're not reinforcing the value they're providing, then they potentially are not getting their needs filled either.
Right.
My next article, this is a podcast, and this podcast is through Harvard Business Review. It looks like it's going to be a series of podcasts by Azhar, but this first one talks about investing in disruptive innovation. And I did listen to all but I think like the last couple minutes of this podcast, because I thought it was really interesting, because we've talked about aspects of this when it comes to security. The next 5 disruptive innovative technologies, they talk about robotics, they talk about DNA sequencing, let's see, they talk about energy storage, deep learning, and blockchain. And deep learning and blockchain are the buzzwords, obviously, in the security space that we know the most. But they talk about just the acceleration of what these new disruptive technologies are doing. They talked about Einstein, which is Salesforce's um, uh, deep learning. ML is kind of a service
Mm-hmm.
project where in less than a year, it's gone from 1 billion decisions to now making over 6 billion decisions. Just the exponential increase of how this stuff is working. It's really interesting to understand how these technologies will evolve, and then the implications of this from a security perspective, because we talk a lot about deep learning from a security perspective. We've talked a lot about blockchain, even though we haven't seen a lot of really good uses for blockchain. But it gives you this understanding of how disruptive these technologies really will be to us. And hopefully we start thinking about the security ramifications of this disruption, because it's coming, whether we think it's coming or not.
I think there's always been a steady train of disruptions for our industry, which is one of the things that makes it really exciting.
Yes, absolutely. Next article, accelerating business through customer centricity. And this is what this one's talking about, Paul. And you and I have this experience from last week, being down in Orlando. The difference between customer service and customer centricity, and how customer centricity will accelerate business more than just customer service. And if you think about the experience of what you and the family went through last week, of how all the pieces come together, that's a very customer centricity based approach. And think about all the fun you had. Think about how all the things were brought together. Think about that experience and why you probably want to go back with the family, or why the family wants to go back. That's what this article is talking about, is when you can bring all those pieces together to improve the overall customer experience, it will accelerate growth for you. And it's not just about customer service and addressing issues. It's about really that whole life cycle and experience of what you're doing.
Well, creating a culture at that scale certainly is difficult. And even as well as some places will do that, it still can fall down just because of the sheer scale. Like, how do you account for an employee that's just having a bad day because they got forced to work a double shift, right? Like, that's hard. No, it's rare and it's the exception. It's not the rule. But that's hard. I think that's one of the more difficult things about running a business and having good customer experiences is, as you grow, having employees that have a bad day or have a moment or whatever is really hard. And at the end of the day, it's people, right? And every person has their limits. And sometimes you see people that I'm like, I don't know how they have that much patience, right? You get to the end of someone's shift, right? They probably don't have as much patience. So that's a very difficult thing, I think, as a business owner to manage in terms of your customer experience.
Yeah, but last week's experience, I mean, you'd walk down the hallway and everybody would say good morning to you or good evening to you. I mean, it is ingrained in the culture. And when it works, it works very, very well. A lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. 8 strategies to find work-life balance from a serial entrepreneur. Some really good tips in here, actually. I thought was, as much as, you and I continue to do what we do, which we love, and grow the business, these are just really great tips to say, okay, how do I get that, kind of that work-life balance back in check sometimes? Number one, take time away from technology. I think we all know this, right? Sometimes you just got to walk away from the phone or the monitor and give yourself some time. That, to me, that was.
I will also say, to improve your work-life balance, taking a long I had no idea, and I did not expect this. This was the longest vacation I think I had ever taken with my family collectively together as we stand today, and that was tremendously just valuable for your work-life balance, right? Spending time both with your work side without distractions and spending time with your family without distractions is super important in both directions, really, right? And I think that really helps strike a work-life balance, is, taking a vacation and going away and just being with people without all of those other distractions, both in family and in work, I think is really, I never understood the importance until, recently, I think.
Yeah, and it was hard when you were, kind of the one-man show doing it right now. We can balance each other a little bit. You did that. I took the reins. We got the stuff done, and we're gonna flop that in June when I'm in Italy.
It was interesting. I was
days.
interviewing someone last Thursday. Who was that? And she talked about one of the hardest things for a startup to do was to give the reins over to others and build a leadership team. And I was kind of like laughing because I'm like, yeah, that's like what I just did late last year, right? And that actually, in the context of this article, Matt, is an important point, is to recognize that you need other people on your team and that you have to hand the reins over to those people so that you can still maintain your work-life balance as your family grows and as your business grows, right?
Yes, agreed. Couple other really good points in here. Achieve inbox zero. This has always been my goal. I am an email inbox user. If it's in my inbox, I have to do something about it. Therefore, my goal is to achieve inbox zero. Unfortunately, I've never gotten there. I have gotten it within a page where I didn't have to scroll anymore.
Yep.
And I feel pretty good when I've got it down to that small of an inbox. I don't think I can achieve a zero inbox, but that's how I work. I do that.
Yeah, I think trying to get stuff out of email is important. If it can be replaced with something else, do those things first before you tackle inbox zero would be my advice. Because I actually, going back to what Mike was saying, as technology evolves, I think there's a lot of things that we could rely on email for that are better served in other technologies, such as Slack or a ticketing system, Signal, the whole, all of the newer technologies that can really help you really get your inbox down. So if something is in your inbox, it is important. The problem still today is everything you do, people want your email address and they want you to be on an email list. And it's unfortunate because there are lists that are very important and do provide, going back to value, provide value, right? But there's so much of it that it's like a full-time job to manage an inbox sometimes. So I feel like that's why a lot of people don't get to zero, because of just the time commitment to managing your email. What does help is trying to take things out of email.
Yeah. And I think my junk inbox is way bigger than my regular inbox at this point, because for that reason, right? My email's everywhere. It's like, pun it.
Right. Yeah. Like, you don't want to lose an important notification, which are still sent by financial institutions and other places as well. I don't like to miss out on a deal, right? If you're going to purchase something and you had an opportunity to get some kind of discount on it, sometimes it's sitting in your email box somewhere, right? So it's all a trade-off.
It is. This next tip, put your whole life on a calendar. I do. Everything.
We say that, I think, at least once a month, and it's an important point. You have to manage your life by a calendar, and surround yourself with the other people who you surround yourself also have to manage their lives via a calendar and share your calendars. That's one thing my wife and I have gotten much better at over the years, is we both are using the calendar. And I don't know how we do it without it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, just think about all the coordination, right? Every morning I got to get Brendan to the Air Force Academy and back, and then we start our meetings, right? If all those things weren't on my calendar,
right?
I mean, I wouldn't be able to manage the day easily, because I got to make sure I don't have overlaps in commute time with meetings, because it's not the most effective use of my time.
Well,
I live and die by the calendar.
That was the interesting thing about being on vacation with the family, is we didn't have to have a calendar. We just had an app that told us where we needed to go and what we needed to do, and it was one app. My wife and I both had it on our phone, and that's what we were doing, right?
Yeah, basically the same concept. It was just all within the specific app.
Yep.
Dinner reservations, which rides, etc.
You do have, by the way, 15 minutes past your fast pass to get there in the magical place. We were running through a park, and I made it there at like 11:59, and I was rejoicing. And the nice lady, she was like, you had 15 minutes. I'm like, you know what? Don't tell us that. She's like, all right, we'll back up. She's like, pretend I never said that. We need to be there. We need that 15-minute buffer. We don't need to know it exists, right?
Exactly right. And there's a couple more in here. Make time for exercise every day. I'm a big believer in this. My wife and I try to get out and walk a couple miles every day, so you're not sitting constantly at your desk, just heads down. I mean, get up, get some exercise. It's great for working through problems and just clearing the mind, getting back
Agree.
and then focusing, which leads into, make the most of your productive hours, which
Vacation was exhausting because we
varies.
walked 4 or 5 miles a day, but it was it was great exercise, right? And I think coming back, it really made me realize, Matt, at this point where every article like this suggests, some level of exercise per day, and
Yeah.
it just underscored how important, how much better it made you feel when you got that exercise in.
Yeah, because otherwise we just sit at the
We do.
we sit at the
We
computer
do.
screen all day long, right? We just heads down working. It's not healthy and it's not good for us when we're trying to solve problems or trying to do some other stuff.
Yeah.
Creativity, I use that time to be more creative and think through problems, which you don't get a chance when you're sitting in
Right.
front of screen just doing tasks all day long.
Yep.
So really good article for people who are interested. Which leads into my next one, work from a calendar, not a to-do list. I am a calendar guy, kind of reinforce this. I do to-dos on paper, but if there are activities that require me to do something or remind me to do something, I put them in my calendar.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do shift back and forth, but they talk more about working from your calendar, not a to-do list, which I strongly agree with. It really helps me get my stuff organized.
Yeah, I started doing that last year, and it was extremely helpful, right? Especially when we were working a lot on sales, for example. I would just block time off. Like this is when I'm going to work on sales, because there was no other way that it would go. As you noticed, traveling, Matt, right? You get behind on your sales tasks, because if you don't set aside that time, it's easy to your to-do list starts growing, and then it gets overwhelming, and then no one works good when they're overwhelmed like that. So being able to break up your work day, and I've always said I like to give myself a couple of different options during a reserved work time, right? Like I'll reserve half an hour, and I'm like, okay, in that calendar section, I'm like, you got to work on at least one of these three things, all of them if possible, but give yourself some options. So what you're most motivated to work on is on your list. All right, I can get that done and bang it out. So I actually did that this morning, actually.
Yeah, in the article actually talks about grouping like activities together when you block out your calendar. For example, on Friday I was doing show prep for this show and for Application Security Weekly. So you kind of block out time to do those, even though they're different, they're similar. And so your mind is focused on those similar activities. Then like Mondays are our sales meetings day, right?
Yeah.
And so the tasks associated on my calendar today are, oh yeah, I got to do all those sales follow-ups, right? And so each day kind of has different groups of activities that are similar.
Yes.
So that it just your brain is already thinking that way, so it's a little easier to get through that workload.
Great advice. And I got some examples on that, right? If I'm going to set aside time to update some code or write some code, I know that I need an hour or more, right, to really like dig in and accomplish something inside when I'm writing code. But on a day like today, Mondays, just in case our viewers were wondering, inside baseball, right? Mondays is largely our meeting and show day, right? We do 2 shows, and I've got at least 2 weekly standing meetings. So I know my time in between those activities is pretty limited, oftentimes less than an hour if you factor in the transition time. So the tasks in between are like, I got to update a redirect, I got to fix a small bug here that I just got to carve out some time to do. So they're smaller tasks. And then on the days where I have a longer break between meetings, sometimes I'll block that time off. That's when I'll do the tasks that I know I need to spend a little more time on, consecutive time. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time, because if you're trying to write code in a half an hour in between meetings, it doesn't work, right? And if those of you listening, right, you know you have tasks. It may not be coding or fixing bugs. It could be something different, but put those in the right spots really, I think, helps your productivity overall.
Yep. Monday is sales.
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday is ops. Friday is all the other business stuff, right? Yep. And that's that's how the days kind of flush out. If I'm doing anything outside of those windows, it's Wednesday and Thursday, because I know I'm not already dealing with 3 major types of activities at those other 3 days. All right, I got a couple more here. Stop eliminating perfectly good candidates by asking them the wrong questions. This is an interesting article if you're on the hiring side.
Yeah.
If you're going out and doing interviews to look for candidates, and I'm trying to find the exact phrase because it was a really interesting way to think about it. It's don't ask about experience. Don't ask questions about their past experience. Ask questions about their capabilities, and it leads to a much more productive interview because a lot of us will look at a person's resume, look at their past experience, and maybe rule them out when they might be perfectly good candidates because just by looking at their experience doesn't really necessarily help you understand how they're going to fit in with the team, how they would achieve certain aspects of what you're hiring for. And so this article says, if you're just asking them about their experience, why are they even in the interview process in the first place? Because typically you would eliminate them from the interview process just by looking at their experience on the resume. So don't re-ask those questions. Ask them about how they did stuff to really gauge their capabilities, and then also how they work well with the team. Because as you think about it, you're hiring for specific skill sets and you're going to integrate them into a broader team. Those are the types of questions you should really be asking once you get to that face-to-face interview to have a much more productive discussion about understanding whether that candidate's the right fit or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, someone gave us some examples, and do you remember what the exact question was? But they came into an interview and they were asking them or like some weird question, and they were like, you know what, I don't know if I want to work here. Right? Like, yeah. So the questions you ask it goes both ways, right?
It does.
You got to ask pertinent questions other than like, what's your favorite color or something like that. John Strand has given me some good examples of the types of puzzles or situations they'll kind of put interview candidates in, and it's to test for a specific skill set. If you're going to be a penetration tester, test the security of applications and organizations. You have to have a certain mindset, so the questions are designed that way. I like those questions. I would feel comfortable answering those questions if I was applying for that position. But if you're asking like really weird, oddball questions on like every interview, I can see that just not being productive for either party.
Yeah, and if you're a good candidate, you're going to ask certain questions back to make sure the company's the right fit for you. So as an interviewer, you better be ready for the interviewee to ask you some very interesting questions back, because they're trying to figure out whether they want to work for you too, to see if there's a cultural fit. Because even though they might be the right candidate for you, if you can't also make them feel comfortable they're going to fit into the culture, guess what? They're not going to accept the job because they don't think you're the right fit for them.
Yep.
Yeah. And that leads to our last article. If you are hiring, where are the 5 states dominating tech employment? So at number 1 on this list, I think everybody knows it's California.
Sure.
California, obviously in the high tech space, Silicon Valley has been a huge tech employer. What I found interesting, actually, Paul, was number 2. Florida is number 2 when it comes to dominating tech employment. We don't think of Florida as a big tech hub, but there's a lot of tech employment going on in Florida right now.
That's interesting.
Number 3 doesn't surprise me. It's Texas.
Yep.
We know Austin and the Austin area and different areas of Texas have had some really good tech. We've always kind of known that as a little kind of hub there, especially in Austin, from our industry anyways. Number 4 was North Carolina.
Yeah, because Raleigh, right, is big.
Yep, RTP is sitting there. And then number 5 was New York. New York's been doing a lot on the tech employment side. I know, New York City specifically has been going after a lot of higher tech.
Actually, kind of surprised Colorado, your home state, Matt, wasn't higher up on the list.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting there. I just don't, it's not as big a state as Florida, Texas, North Carolina, California, or New York. Those are much larger states. We're not as densely populated as those other 5, but there is definitely some good tech talent here in Colorado as well.
Awesome.
All right. That's my articles for the week. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.